Okay, I think it's 2 o'clock, so we can begin. So just to get started, welcome everyone. At this point, check once more that your audio is off for the beginning, and we will have a chance to ask questions at the end of the presentation. And you can also leave your questions already in the chat. There will be part of our team here in the same room with me who will be answering your questions already throughout the presentation. So welcome once again. I am Inka. I am one of the producers for the Oulu 2026 team, and I will take you through the application process today as part of this webinar. So first of all, shortly about the open call in general. At this point, most of you already know that the open call has already opened on 3rd of October, and it will run all the way until the 9th of December. Most of the information regarding the open call will be available on our website. There will be recordings of our previous webinars where we will focus more on the themes and criteria, for example, for the projects. And there will also be some other guidelines, frequently asked questions, and other things that can help you with planning. So now I will just shortly go through the main points for the open call that are good to know when you start planning your project. So at this point in the fall of 2022, we are all inviting you all to become part of the cultural climate change with us. So we're looking at this stage for partners who would be carrying out these specifically larger scale projects that take several years to either prepare or carry out. So the larger scale projects in this open call are not defined by a set budget limit, but what we mean by it is these larger scale projects that have a sort of development aspect to them, which requires for them to start before the year of 2026. In this open call, we are looking for projects where the plans are already at the degree that allow for you as the applicant, whether it's individuals or organizations that are applying, that you can carry out the project independently. We are here to help you with any questions you might have, for example, building contacts in our area, or looking for locations, or looking for other funding, or anything that you might need. But we do expect that the projects that you are planning at this stage are such that you can carry out the project independently yourself towards the cultural capital year. The operative focus, naturally, for the projects we are looking for now should be on the Capital of Culture year of Oulu in 2026, but they can also begin already in the upcoming years before 2026 if it's justified for the achievement of the goals that you wish to achieve with your project. Through this open call, it's possible to apply for co-funding from the Oulu Culture Foundation, and this can equal a maximum of 50% of the overall project costs that you might have with carrying out the entire project. This percentage is a guideline and a maximum. It can also be smaller than 50%, and at this point you can also apply with your project to become part of the culture program, even if funding is not something that you are looking for. So you can also go through the same process and apply to become part of the culture program for 2026 with a project that you already have other, for example, funding, or your organization is carrying out otherwise. So then just shortly about the criteria and instructions before we go to the actual application form. So the evaluation of the applications will be carried out within our team, and in addition by a panel of experts who will be representing various fields and will be professionals of different aspects of the applications that we are asking you to submit in. The applications will be processed confidentially, so whatever project plans you are proposing to us at this point will be confidential. And also the names of the experts that will be involved in the projects will not be published throughout the process we're going on. Good thing to know at this point when you are starting with the planning of your projects is that there is a possibility for us that we can also go through a negotiated procedure with the projects when seen necessary. So this means that there can be understandably some aspects in your project proposals that are not set at this time by the end of the year, for example, or there might be some change on your behalf that you wish to let us know of, or we might have some more questions or suggestions that we might want to discuss with you regarding, for example, the way that your project fits to the overall cultural program that we are planning for the year of 2026. So it is a negotiated procedure, and we will have these discussions with you, any relevant applicants that it might apply to next spring before the final funding decisions are made. So then just the overall application process. So the application form itself is open on our website. You can find the link either through the Open Call website that had the registration link for all the webinars and any other information, or you can access it directly through the link mentioned here. This application form will be open for you to work on, has already been opened on the 3rd of October, and it will be open all the way until the 9th of December. And note that the application period ends at midnight Finnish time, so Eastern European time on the 9th of December. So the 3 steps that you need to take now in the upcoming few months are, first of all, registering your user account. I will show you in a minute how to do this on the actual application form. And at this point, you need to define what kind of applicant type you are representing. So you can either apply as an individual, a work group, or an organization. So these might have some differences while you are filling in the application, whether you have chosen to apply as an individual or work group or an organization. And a good thing to note also is that if you decide to apply as a work group, the members of the work group need to be defined already prior to creating the application. So you need to, at this point, already determine who are the members and their names and some personal details regarding the applicants. Once you have set up an account and you are there as a user, you can create the actual application. And at this point, it's also possible, it's good to know that it's possible to download a PDF preview of the form to help you and any collaboration partners you might have to help with planning. So you can, for example, take this template and preview and work on your application on another platform, whatever is the most suitable for you and your, for example, organization's needs. And the applications can be edited all the way until the end of the call. So it's also possible that we encourage you that you already register into the system, start on your application, and it's possible to do any changes and edits all the way until the 9th of December. Then on by the 9th of December, you should submit your application and sorry, remember to submit your application in time. And here it's also good to note that after the applications are submitted, you will still have 24 hours to make any necessary changes or edits to your submitted application. So this is good to note that even though the final deadline is on the 9th of December at midnight Eastern European time, you can, and we of course strongly encourage you to leave your application in before this. And then if any additional information is needed or you forgot something from the form, you still have a day to fill those in. So let's now go to the actual application form. Just a second, I will share with you the view from here. And let's switch to English. Okay, so here you see the basic view for the actual application system. So this is the system that is now open for this open call and for the applications, but it will also be used throughout the process for your project and your communication and, for example, reporting with us. Once you land on the page and you're ready to start with your application process, you start with registering your user account. In the registration, there are some instructions already on this page, which we encourage you to take a good look at and read through. And here you can see what I mentioned earlier about the applicant type, that you should at already this stage, sorry, determine what type of applicant you are, whether you're an individual applicant, work group, or an organization. One good thing to consider with the upcoming years and the potential other open calls we might also have, but also if you're interested in applying within this open call with several proposals, a work group can be only created for an individual application. So the members set into a work group, you can submit one application, but if you are applying as an organizational member, you can also create several different proposals and applications within that user account. So once you have filled all the necessary information here, you can also use your email as your username. This is something that we recommend because then it's also just naturally easier to remember. But if you, for example, are a part of several projects that you might need to be in control of through your user account, you can use the same email for those, but then make a separate username for each proposal. Then I will take you through the actual application form. So once you have registered your account, you can come to the same page and log in. And now you can see that we are logged in as the demonstration account here in this case, but this will be your login screen with all the necessary information regarding your user account, but also any current or past applications you might have. So here we see current applications. This will be the same similar view for you once you have registered and started off your account application. So from the top, you can create a new application. And once you have an application to work on, it will also be shown in this view. From here, you can also move on to the editing phase of the application. So this is what the actual application form will look for you as well. And you can see that there are a total of 10 steps, technically 8, where you have to fill in some of the questions and information asked. So I will take you through this part step by step. And if any questions also arise at this point, then feel free to leave them in the chat as well. And my colleagues will answer what they can. And we will also have representation from the technical help of the platform who can help us with any more technical questions that you might have. So the first step is simply the instructions space where we just go through the basic criteria, give you a little reminder of those, and you can also find the direct link to the guide for applicants from this page to help you with planning. We can then move forward by always clicking on the save and continue. A good thing to note is that the application form itself will also save some of your answers automatically. So you will notice that it will make the changes as you go along. Even though if you, for example, at some stage might forget to click on the save and continue, but naturally that's a good thing to do as well, to make sure that any changes made have been submitted in the system. The next section, project party, in this part, we are asking you to describe and give any necessary information about any of the organizations, individuals that are part of your proposal. Now this proposal has been made, I think, through an organizational account. So you see the questions that will be asked, for example, here are business ID. And if you would be applying as an individual or work group, this page would be slightly different. So here the main applicant, good to know, is that the main applicant refers to the party who will be responsible for example, handling the partial financing that you might be applying from us, the funding, and also will have any sort of juridical responsibilities over the project. But then later on here, we will also ask you to shortly describe any key project members or working group members that you might have, and briefly present their background or any relevant experience or know-how. Here you will also notice that there is a limit on the number of characters that can be written into some of these answers. And we do encourage you to try to keep it brief and try to have a focus on your answers, that due to the mere number of applications that we receive, the primary information that will be gone through and evaluated in this open call is any of the information that you submit through the form. So it is possible to, for example, also add links to your, could be your artistic portfolio, for example, but we do encourage you to really think about what is written on the form, because that will be the primary form of information that will be evaluated in this open call. Then in the brief project description part, the third part, at this point, we simply ask you to give us the name of the project, a very brief description. As you can see, it's only 300 characters at this point, and mention the amount that is applied for funding from Oulu Culture Foundation. And as mentioned, if you are not applying for a funding, that's also possible. Then just remember to write a 0 to this point, and then the form will let you go on forward. Then the part 4 will be more in detail project plan. And in this part, we do now ask you to evaluate the different aspects and actions that are part of your project more in depth. So we, for example, ask you to think about, reflect on, how does your specific project and your proposal for the cultural capital year, how does it advance cultural climate change, which is the overarching theme for all our work. We also ask you to select the most suitable program team at this point for your specific project, as well as share with us if there is any focus points that could be connected to our cultural program. But at this point, we also want to remind you that the themes and, for example, focus points at this stage are there to give us a better idea of your project and where it could fall in as part of our wider cultural program, and as well to help you with just planning and thinking about how could your work connect with the overall work of the cultural capital and the thematics of it. So the decision whether you, for example, think at this point that your project could be more of in the line of the thematic of Brave Hinterland, or whether at the later stage it develops to see more that the themes and the ideas of Wild City, for example, are more suitable, and those won't be an aspect that will be affecting the evaluation of your project, or, for example, the financing. So that's also just a good thing to look at them at this point as more as a guideline for your planning, and as well as our understanding of your project. Then as we move on, we ask you to start to lay out the project plan more in detail, share with us some of the action plan and any of the actions that on a yearly basis will take place. And here, as mentioned, the focus of the project should be in the upcoming years towards 2026, so that there will be some form of sharing your project, possibly to the wider audience in 2026. But you can here also share with us and justify what kind of actions do you think will be necessary already in the planning stages for your project. The project highlight in 2026 here refers to the way that you will be sharing your work, your project, any aspect of it, any of the outcomes of the work that will take place in the wider project to, for example, the local audiences here or internationally, however fits your project, that we naturally hope that there will be some aspect and some level of sharing happening, coming out, a highlight in the 2026. And we ask you to describe that here at this point. But if you feel like this is not something that is in any way part of your project, you can also explain here, why do you think that that is? The key points of project implementation, here we ask you to just think about, reflect on what are the key points, what are the key actions in achieving the goals and ideals sort of for your project. So what is something that needs to be completed, needs to be carried out as part of the project in order for the project to be what you're planning it for it to be, what you wish for it to achieve, as well as what is something that relates to, for example, the wider themes of the cultural capital, that you think that these are the key aspects. You can also here lay out if there are any sort of additional parts that you think that would be supporting, would be beneficial, that you would like to carry out as the project. But here we ask you to reflect on these sort of levels and different aspects of the project. Yes, and then the fifth section, as you see, the more detailed project information. Here we ask you to continue the planning by thinking about, for example, who can be the participants for your project activities, and what are, for example, the primary target groups of any of the project activities. And as mentioned here in the further guidelines, we will now ask you to think about more in depth of what you wish to achieve and who you wish to work with as your project, and rather than using overgeneralizations such as saying that your project is open to everyone. Naturally, we hope that a lot of the program will be open to everyone, but it's also a good thing to think about already in the planning stages, that what groups, for example, could you specifically cater in your project if there will be some sort of, for example, participatory aspect to it. Then we asked you to estimate how many visitors or participants will be engaged in your project's activities or, for example, events. And again, please be realistic. Think about the overall goals of your project, overall aims. This will not be an evaluation criteria that the more the merrier. So you don't need to think about it from that perspective, that the project itself can be equally as fitting for our wider culture program. If, for example, the people participating will be 20, then it will be 100, if that's something that suits the project. We also asked you to already at this point tell us what geographical area will your project mainly be carried out in. So as mentioned, for example, in the guide for applicants, the program should be implemented in whole or in part within the Oulu 2026 area. So it can also have international collaborations, or some parts, for example, can take place elsewhere in Finland or elsewhere in Europe or around the world, but some section of it should be carried out here in the Oulu 2026 area. So here you can pinpoint, if you know already, which area you will be working on. And also here is good to note that if you are thinking about carrying out your project in other municipalities outside Oulu city in the Oulu 2026 area, you can also, by clicking this one, choose to share with us which municipalities do you think that your project will focus on if you already know this at this stage. For the project venues, we ask you to, as mentioned here, enter and describe the venues or locations or areas that you will be working in as accurately as you currently can. So it's understandable that not every project will at this point already know where exactly it will take place, especially if you are an international party that is applying and you wish to work in our area here in Oulu 2026 area. But we do ask you to, if you know already, if there are any set locations, but also if you have any specific needs for your project, that even if you don't have the set locations, but you know that there are some aspects to it that are a requirement for you to carry out your project, and also mention those here. So if your project goes onwards and we can start carrying it out so that we will be there to support you along the way, then it's good for us to know what kind of projects will be needing what kind of venues. And it is also an aspect that we know that in the upcoming years towards 2026, new spaces for arts and culture and any of the initiatives that will take part of the will take place as part of the European Capital of Culture program of Oulu. There will be new places opening, new kind of actions. So it's also good that we can take into account any possible needs you might have at this point. Also mention if you are planning on having any sort of hybrid participation as part of your project. So Oulu 2026 has an ambitious goal of producing 70% of the entire culture program with some sort of hybrid aspect to it. So this can be the more traditional form of, for example, participating to some sort of project remotely, but it can also, for example, mean any sort of social media applications or additions to your program. So think about that now in the planning stages, and please share with us any ideas or plans you might have. Then we move on to the more long-term impact on our area, wider Northern Finland, as well as Europe. And then we ask you to evaluate the accessibility that is addressed in your project, as well as the environmental impact and sustainability. So here you also will have some guidelines, some tips to go through and think about when you are thinking about how well are these things already taken into account in your project. Then in the sixth section, we move on to the European dimension and partnerships. And here we ask you to evaluate the different ways that your project can be promoting interaction. So as you can see, there's questions about, for example, how will your project promote interaction between people who experience the art and culture, who are maybe the creators, who are representing, for example, different fields of culture, or, for example, are coming from the background of science. And for each question that you click, that there will be some interaction that you promote, we also ask you to motivate your answer further. So make sure that when you're filling in the actual form, you click on the, for example, yes and no, and make sure that you are also answering the further motivations that are required from you. Then moving on to the European dimension, a question we often ask is whether it's mandatory that there is, for example, on an organizational level, some international cooperation in your project. And we have set in the criteria, for example, evaluation criteria for the project, that this is encouraged and it will be seen as a plus for your application. But the European dimension itself that we are expecting from all our projects can take different forms. So it can be also other things than just international cooperation, for example, on an organizational level. So this section, you can lay out what are your thoughts on that? Will there be partners or members, for example, from other European countries, or will there be more of a thematic connection to Europe-wide issues or thematics that we're dealing with? And the same applies here, that remember to check if you are clicking yes or no, then to motivate your answers further. This section will also include a further explanation of any partners you have already agreed on to be working with within your project. And we asked you also to motivate here, why did you select or choose to work with this partner, or what is their contribution to the carrying out of the project? So there's different section for the European partners, as well as the local and national partners. And then there's, at the end of this section, there's also one more point for clicking. If you don't yet at this point have, for example, partnerships in our area or in Europe, or you are open to including more individuals or organizations into your project, mark your interest here, and you can then describe to us what kind of partners you are looking for example, within our area, what kind of expertise, what kind of know-how, what kind of input you are looking for from the local partners. And then once we have all the applications in, and once the evaluation process begins next spring, we will also look for opportunities to connect you with any local or European or wider international partners. In the budget section, as you can see, it's quite simplistic at this point. So we asked you to just think about these different costs that are related to your project, especially on a yearly basis. So think about if there's already some costs for expected for next year, for example, and then towards the cultural capital year. And also good to know is, of course, naturally you might have some other forms of budgeting. You might have some other division of costs, for example, that are something that, for example, your organization is used to working with, and that's naturally okay, as we are expecting you to be able to carry out the projects independently. But here we're just asking for a brief understanding of what kind of costs are involved, and we are asking it for in this uniform format, so there's some comparability between the projects as well. And same applies for the funding plan for the income. So please mark down, in addition to the funding you might be applying from the Oulu Culture Foundation through the open call, what are your plans or already existing set agreements for any other funding? If you have any ticket sales that will be part of your program, or you have, for example, any local business partnerships, as well as if there's either volunteer or paid staff working on the project, then also it's good to know that for example, salary costs can be calculated as part of the funding. And if necessary, please also provide any additional clarifications or specifications to the budgets if you think that's necessary. Lastly, in this part, briefly mention if you already have built some business partnerships. So this is something that we're interested in hearing when we think about the overall program, all the parties that will be involved, as well as any possible business partnerships that will be created as through this sort of umbrella project that we are carrying out here as the Oulu Culture Foundation. And then lastly, but not least, there will be the communication and marketing section. So in this section, just follow the instructions for a brief marketing and communications plan, as well as laying out any marketing and communication channels you have already that you are using or will be using as part of the project. So here we'll have the instructions for what to mention. So think about the time that for each of these actions, the target group, the planned activities, and then the overall plan for the upcoming years for when the project will be carried out. Then, as you can see now here at the top, we have now successfully gone through the entire applications, and you can see that each section has been marked with the completed sign, and we have reached the summary section where you can still once more go through each section. You can click and they will take you back to each section from there as well. And at this point, it's also possible, as you see, export it to PDF. So for example, if you have any partners that might need to take a look at your application before it's submitted, you can also do that from this point and then share, for example, through email. Go through the plan, of course, carefully in detail. Any sections that might not be completed completely, or there might be some issues with submitting, for example, the budget numbers or something like that with the technical aspect of a form, they will show up in red in this section. So you still have a chance to correct those and you will notice what is still missing. And as we go through the entire application, we see that there won't be any parts missing. And at this point, it will be possible for me to send and submit the application. As you see, this is our demonstration account that we have already sent in the application. That send button will show up here on the summary page. And after you have successfully submitted your application, you will see this green text that you see here on the top of my application, where it states that the application has been registered as received at our end. So it will be now submitted as part of the open call. And as you can see, also mentioned here that this is the time when you will still have those 24 last hours to do any necessary changes or update any information that you think might be necessary on your application. And this part will also note how much time you still have left to work on any final changes. So I think that's it for the technical, going through step by step the whole process. And if you have any questions, I don't know if there's been any questions in the chat that we might want to bring up, or if someone wants to now open their microphone and ask, can also answer any questions you might have. And as mentioned,
hi.
Oh yeah, yes, sure.
Hi, this is Jana Tinteri, and I'm asking a question related to the digitalization of the event because it was important for you. Is it enough if we have, for example, a virtual experience of the performance afterwards, because we still need to do all the editing and so on, so that it would be available on a website?
Yes, it's also possible that you have, for example, a form of documentation that will be shared more widely, for example, virtually. That's also one possible way of executing the more hybrid production of it. And as you could see here in the form, at this point, we ask you to briefly mention if you have any plans or interest in developing this kind of work within your project, and then you can elaborate on it, share with us more if already you know at this stage, but it can also come later on as the project evolves.
Thank you.
Are there any questions in the? And as mentioned before, our technical assistance, technical expert from Rimbert, a company who is responsible for the functioning of this site, is also there with us. So if you have any technical questions that you might have that we might not be able to answer, then feel free to ask those as well at this point. There's someone with a hand up. Feel free to put on your microphone and ask a question.
Maybe a basic question regarding the budget. The event is going to be in 3 years. So I mean, is it okay to provide only estimations?
Yes, it's possible that, I mean, we understand that since the open call is open already this fall and the main things will be executed in 2026, there's some aspects of the budgeting, for example, that cannot be known. But we do of course ask you to be as specific as possible. And then in the additional information, you can also, for example, open up a little bit why, for example, something is still, for example, not set, or if there's some things that are dependent that can, for example, be set next year or later in the process, then you can open up those in the additional information section, so we know what your plan is based.
Oh, okay. And in the budget, do we put there as well the, let's say, the coordination time, like the work we put in there, like the time, I mean salaries basically, or is it?
Yeah, you can already in
okay, I didn't see it. Yes. Okay, super.
Upcoming years already, if, for example, the work for your project begins in 2024 with the core team that will, for example, start with the planning of the project to continue forward, and then there will be a bigger scale work in 2025, then yes, the costs related for 2024 can also be accounted for. Here it's good to know, depending on if you're applying, for example, as an organization or in work group, that think about how these costs can be accounted for and thought about. For example, if you are already taking into account the project in your organization's budget, that you know sort of, well, for example, what percentage of people's time and salary will go into the project. And as long as you can provide this information later, then yes.
Okay. Good. And then one last question. Does it make a difference in the application if we apply as a working group or an association, or is it exactly the same?
The working group and association, it depends on, from your perspective, how will you be handling the sort of administrative side of the project.
Exactly.
So if you're interested in getting the possible funding from the Oulu Culture Foundation through the organization, then apply as an organization. But if you think about from perspective of us in the evaluation, then there is no difference, that everyone's welcome to apply.
Because we've been working for a long time as informal group, and all the time there is this question. I was wondering if it would make big difference, but I understand that it doesn't make a big difference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then if there's no more questions at this time, I will just oh yeah, sure.
Sorry, I would have a few more questions if it's still possible.
Yeah.
So I was asking also in the Finnish seminar. So let's say I have a group and I know already the members of the group, but I still need one more person, and I don't have that person yet. And I know what function that person should carry out in order to fulfill the project. So I can't put that person when I set up the account, no? But can I still make a change later during negotiations? Tell you that, okay, now we have an additional person.
I think
coming.
I don't know if our technical staff can answer the question about whether
I can perhaps answer that. If you don't know all the members of the working group at the moment, the staff at Oulu 2026 can always add new members later. So as long as you have at least one member that you know, add this person now, and then you can send them more names later on.
Thank you. And
thank you. That's a good tip. So maybe it's a good idea at this point to, for example, download the preview and start working on your application. Also, it's possible to do that outside the system if you're, for example, expecting to know the members by the end of the application period. So that's also, of course, possible.
Yeah, no, my situation is that I already know all the members, but for example, there are, of course, these performers and sound engineer and all these people that will be part of the project somehow at a very much later stage, but I don't know their name in advance. So yeah. And then I would like to ask you quickly about the budget. one more question. So, what will you be mainly funding? Do you also fund salaries, and do you fund also part of salaries, like percentage-wise, let's say 25% or 50% or whatever it is, or do you fund mainly other expenses? What will you? What are the main thing? Yeah.
So at this point, in the planning stages, there won't be separation for what the Oulu 2026 possible partial funding will be specifically targeted on. So it can be covered, it can be used to cover, for example, any salary expenses or any other, for example, any project related costs that you might have. So overall, all the costs in general are applicable. The only set restrictions to this is that infrastructure costs, for example, so either building or, for example, repairing any cultural venues, that might be something that some organizations might be thinking about doing as part of the application. Those can be only accounted for if they are part of our larger project. So we are interested in supporting the development of, for example, program within these spaces rather than simply the upkeeping or creation of the spaces. And then another thing is that also the work of individual artists or, for example, scientists and their, for example, travel can be included in a wider project, but it cannot be the only expense that is related to a project. So in that sense, the funding that can be applied at this stage is not direct funding to individual artists. Hope this answers the question.
Thank you. Could you clarify this last sentence that you said? So there's, yeah, sorry.
Just for the last sentence to recap. So there can be the costs for example, the work of individual artists included in your wider project if there is, for example, collaboration between artists, or the artist is somehow, of course, naturally, there's a lot of projects where they are integral to the carrying out of the project, but this open call is not aimed for individual artists to apply for funding for their individual specific work. For example, there are some, especially in Finland, you might have some yearly based support systems that are more suitable for that kind of works, but the involvement of artists can also be accounted for naturally.
Okay, thank you.
I will briefly go through just the timeline at this point, and if there are any
Excuse me, I had a question. I raised my hand. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, sure.
Hi.
Sure.
Thank you. My question is about budgeting as well, in a more practical sense, because we are talking about a 4-year plan. And of course, we will present you with a payment schedule and etc. But in 4 years' time, many things can happen. And my concern is about the exchange rate fluctuation, because if I understand the official currency is in euro, but in case of like radical drops in the exchange rate and the face value of the euro, for instance, do we have a plan for contingency in terms of if the euro is valuing more or less than today in 4 years' time? How can we secure that the original funding plan will be fulfilled in case of radical exchange rate fluctuation?
So it's a good question, because naturally at this point it's very difficult to say what the situation will be like in the upcoming years. At this point, I suggest that in the planning stages, you note in your project plan, in the additional information for your budget, if there is some specific concerns that might concern your project, and you think, for example, that it might have an effect. Overall, as the process from the perspective of the Oulu Culture Foundation, at this point, I would say that this is something that is comparable, for example, to the securing of other additional funding for the other 50%. So once we move on with the process, and once the culture program, the realization of it begins, and we know what actions will take place on which years, and we will make the also agreements with different organizations. At this point, for example, if you are unable to secure some of the funding, there will always be room for negotiation with this, and we hope to open the discussion then at this point if, for example, the scale of the project can be adapted to account for the missing funding. And I think this is something that we need to think about, and I cannot give you a definite answer at this point, but to reassure you that there's definitely room for negotiation and discussions at a later point if this becomes something within your project that might jeopardize the execution of it.
Excellent. Thank you very much for clarifying.
Okay, then lastly, I will just briefly show you the timeline for the upcoming few months. So as you see, we are now in the open call stage where we'll have the application system open. There will be a chance to reserve book a time in a remote help desk clinic with us, the Oulu 2026 production team, where you can ask any questions or concerns you might have, either regarding, for example, the specific application system, but also any ideas, any these kind of questions, good questions you presented today that you might have coming up, filling up the application form. And then we'll have one more webinar coming up at the end of November as well. And you can register both to the next webinar later on our website, and the help desk registration will be open this afternoon, right after the webinar. In next spring, we will have the processing stage where we will go through and evaluate all the applications within our team and with the external experts, and we will open the negotiations with the applicants when necessary. And you should expect the co-funding decisions by the end of May 2023. Then just lastly, now good luck with planning, and you can start by going through the guide for applicants, the frequently asked questions, and any other materials that can be found from our website, the same website where the recording of this webinar will be found in a few weeks, I think. Then the online help desks registration will be also on the website. And the questions we will be answering primarily through either the application system or through email at opencall@oulu2026. But feel free to get in touch with us also throughout the process if any questions arise. So at this point, I thank you everyone and wish you good luck with the planning and with your applications. And we hope to see you at these help desk clinics and also at the next webinar. So thank you everyone. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you again.